Welcome to the Africa2100 Podcast, where we seek to demystify entrepreneurship. I am your host, Kibr Dästa. This season, we are following the journey of those who were previously in the diaspora, returned home, and are building impactful ventures. Today's episode proves that starting afresh every few years can be a key to continued growth. Our guest for today is Yohannes Tsehai. Welcome, Yohannes.
Hi, Judy. Nice to talk to you.
Likewise, Bob. Thank you for joining us. So, Yohannes, can you begin by sharing with our audience what they should know about you and the work that you do?
Sure. I'm Ethiopian by background. I was born here and lived over half my life in Ethiopia, less than half my life in the U.S. I'm a lawyer by training, but I currently, work for an African fintech, and I'm also working to establish a cancer clinic here in Ethiopia. And then I also serve on the board of an international school that I actually went to and I used to teach at when I first moved back.
So, growing up, what can you remember about your childhood? What are some of the distinct memories that come to mind?
Sure. As a young child, I left Ethiopia when I was 7. But even though I was young, I have pretty vivid memories since I have, 4 older siblings and a younger sibling as well. So I remember, since they were older, they went to school before me, but had a tutor. They used to come to our house. I remember sitting in with them because I was always very curious and into school and reading. So I remember sitting in with them and trying to answer questions, even though, I was really young. I wasn't sure what they were talking about. So that's a nice memory. But then I also have some, tougher memories as I got older, because there was a civil war, raging in Ethiopia. We had what we call the Derg military dictatorship was ruling the country. And this was in the late 80s. Soldiers used to come to our house, everyone's houses, but looking for teenagers to draft into the military. So I have memories of hiding my older siblings and cousins. And that's why we ended up leaving the country. So I have very, wonderful, great memories with my family, but then also, some tougher memories in terms of what was going on in the country.
Can you tell us a little more about that experience of living in the country and having to relocate to the U.S.?
Sure. So we left at different times. My older siblings left first, and they initially went to boarding school in Kentucky. And then I joined them a little bit later. So I ended up actually staying the longest, since my younger brother went with my mom. And then I stayed for an extra year or 6 months, I'm not exactly sure, with my dad. So I remember those times when it was just me and my dad, which were, both lonely in the sense that I didn't have my siblings, but I had some fond memories of, spending time with my dad as well. But so I was the last one to go, and I went with a couple of cousins. So things were pretty well settled by the time I moved to the U.S., which ended up being Dallas, Texas. So, no, my dad stayed in Ethiopia the whole time. My mom was there, and my siblings were there, and they had rented an apartment. But I do remember also one interesting memory is I was 7 years old, but I was actually going to the 4th grade, I think. So I was quite young for my age. So I know finding a school that would take me was tough, because we're going to public schools, but they had age restrictions. So I had to go to a couple of schools before they let me go, and I made me take exams. Fortunately, I did fine at them. But yes, I remember going to like 3 schools before I was able to find a school to go to.
What was that transition like when you settled down in Texas?
Yeah, children are very, resilient. So it wasn't really a difficult transition. As I said, it definitely was helped by the fact that, I had most of my family, other than my dad there. My mom stayed with us, most of the time. Obviously, there was, a culture shock in terms of, a very different country between the U.S. and Ethiopia. This was like in 1987. But since I was so young, it wasn't that difficult. But definitely in school, I remember getting very strange, questions about like where I was from, if I lived in a tree, avoid the lions, and yeah. So there's a lot of weird memories. And I remember bringing food to school, and people thinking my food was weird because, in Ethiopia we eat injera, eat with your hands, and kids had never seen that before. So yeah, I definitely have some funny memories of being teased, but yeah, I didn't take it too seriously.
So how long in total were you in Dallas before you moved?
So I was there for 6 years. So from fourth to ninth grade, and 1 year we'd moved to Arlington, a suburb, and then moved back. But yeah, I was there for 6 years, and then moved back to Ethiopia at 13. And by this point, I was going to the 10th grade. And initially, I actually moved back because there was a different government. First the democratic government, but also the country was much more stable. And it was my parents' actually 25th anniversary. So we all came back as a family for that. And then, they just told us that, oh, you can actually stay and go to school here. And then some of my older siblings, went back and some stayed. So it was definitely like, yeah, a shock that we ended up staying. It was a tough transition, initially, because, I was a teenager, got used to living in the U.S. And then before, I went to a British school before I left, which, I had very limited memories of, but now I was going to go to an American school. So that made the transition easier. But I remember for the first couple of months, it was definitely tough because I wanted to go back to America.
When did you decide and why did you decide to become a lawyer?
I mean, when I was a kid, people used to always tell me, oh, you should become a lawyer. You're very argumentative, and you think you know it all. But I also as a kid, I remember my first memory was like we had a friend of the family that was a pilot and had the outfit, and that was the first thing I wanted to be. And then the next thing was I'm sure I probably watched some movies about lawyers and thought that was interesting and exciting. But then as I got older, so this would be in high school, and then returning back to the U.S. For college, I really felt like a legal degree was very useful because you can do a lot of different things. You don't have to go to a courtroom and just practice law, but you can use that, legal degree to do policy work, or you can use that legal degree, to work in business. So I like that aspect, as well. And then, being a lawyer, you have to really see things from different people's perspectives. Some of the things you learn, as a lawyer is to be very critical, but be able to argue any side of an argument. And, and I learned some of that even before going to law school. So I thought that was very useful.
So how did you now go about pursuing getting that law degree? Can you take us through that journey?
Sure. So I moved back, graduated high school, and then I moved back to the U.S. And I moved to Houston because my sister had moved from Dallas to Houston. My older sister, my family wanted us to be together. And I was always interested in government. So I studied political science, and I was always interested in reading, literature. I was a nerd even as a kid. So I minored in English. But I think there was some really good, political science and even pre-law teachers at my school. But the two things that really, I think, shaped, me and my decision was one, I went to Texas Southern University, a historically Black college and university in Houston. So they had a really great debate team. They had a law school as well, but they had a really good debate team. And there was this great coach named Dr. Freeman, who was the debate coach for 50 years. I think he had even taught Barbara Jordan when she was a student there. So I learned a lot about debating. And when you did debate, you had to also do forensics. So you had to do, poetry and impromptu and extemporaneous speaking. So that really helped me because I was very good in terms of writing and reading and, English. But in terms of public speaking, I don't think I had those skills. But then also, I think what really, changed my life was there was a Mickey Leland congressional internship program at that school. So I applied for that program. I was accepted. And then I ended up doing an internship with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who represented the same seat that Mickey Leland and Barbara Jordan had. And, doing that internship and working for her really shaped the rest of my life.
So you returned back to the US to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
Did that stir up any feelings?
Yeah, no, it definitely did, because I had changed in that time. The 6 years I spent in Ethiopia definitely changed my, how I saw myself, my identity, learning about Ethiopian culture and values, and then trying to balance that with American values and expectations, and then how, multilingual, international, both America was, and then in Ethiopia, you had that at my school, which is an international school, but then surrounded by a very different culture. So, yeah, it was definitely an adjustment, just because it wasn't as much of a culture shock since I had lived there, but it was definitely like different seeing myself in that place, but having changed over the intervening years.
And if I remember correctly, you had also set a goal, a limit for yourself for how long you wanted to be in the US. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure, yes. So my plan was, moving back to Ethiopia in high school really planted the seed. Before that, I didn't have, I was obviously loved my country, but I had no interest in living in Ethiopia as a teenager. But seeing all the changes that are happening in Ethiopia and seeing all the poverty as well kind of inspired me to I want to go to the US, want to go to college, law school. But after I get that, education and training, I wanted to move back after 5 years. That was just an idea in my head. I felt like 5 years of experience would be back, and then I want to come back and then, make a difference in my country. And then I'd already applied to go to law school. And fortunately, I was able to get into Harvard Law School. So, went to Harvard, went to school there for 3 years. And, I didn't know much about what people did after law school outside of, what you see and what you read. So the track for most people to go to law school is to work at a law firm, or if you want to be a teacher or a judge, do a clerkship. So I ended up working at a law firm called Cleary Gottlieb in New York, because it was very, international law firm, and I wanted to do international work, and I moved back to Ethiopia. I worked there, and then, as I promised the Congresswoman, after a couple of years, I moved back and to DC and worked for her for about 5 years. And that was a little bit longer, so it ended up being 7 or so years that I stayed in the U.S. But because of both my history with the Congresswoman and because of, her being a very tough boss and being able to still, work for her and still be successful, I was able to get promoted and, start off as legislative counsel. But by the time I finished, I was her chief of staff and legislative director. So I was able to progress in my career, relatively quickly. So it was, and it was very, formative years, not just for me, but also what was happening and changing in the U.S. Because, when I started off as an intern, it was the end of Clinton and the beginning of the, Bush administration. And then when I came back, it was the end of the Bush administration, and then the beginning of the Obama administration, and being there for all these changes, all those changes in the economy, and then the nomination of the first Black president, was very formative for me.
So you already shared with us, Yohannes, your reason or why you needed to return back to Ethiopia. What were you expecting upon the return? Because now you've spent 7 years in the US, and it's you're just about ready to get back and continue that mission. What were you expecting when you decided to make that move back to Ethiopia?
Yeah. And actually it was 14 years, because I spent, 7 years in college and law school, and then 7 years of working. So yeah, so it was a long time, definitely. And obviously I was a, very different person as well, in that 14 years, leaving at the age of 16 and then being 30 when I returned. So one, I tried not to bring any expectations back, because, just like when I moved to Ethiopia, moved to the US as a young kid, it was very, as I mentioned, culture shock and so different. And now that I'd matured, I knew that I couldn't bring my expectations of the US back to Ethiopia and try to impose them there. It was me, that I would have to adapt to returning to Ethiopia. So one, I think that definitely helped. But two, yeah, no, Ethiopia had changed a lot in the intervening times. I think the leader of the country, the prime minister, was still the same, but in terms of everything from the roads and the buildings and the construction, just to the number of people in the country, the population, I think, had increased multifold in the intervening years. So yeah, there was a lot of change that had happened in that time. So I would definitely was not returning to the country. I left.
And what was your plan when you got there?
Well, I really didn't have a specific plan. Yeah, to be honest, even though in my mind I always wanted to go back, I was like going to be open to see what was there. What I knew for sure was, my family was there. I did have my brother, I know, had moved out from an apartment, so I told him to keep that for me. I was going to rent that apartment, so I knew I had a place to stay. But in terms of career-wise, profession, I was just going to work with my brothers, for a little while and try to figure out what I wanted to do, being back in Ethiopia. And I had a general idea, that I didn't want to practice law per se, in terms of like working for a law firm or working, in government, because both the law is very different and also the legal system in Ethiopia is, still at a nation stage, definitely needs, a lot more development. But I thought, okay, maybe I could do some consulting or advisory work in my mind, even though I never worked in consulting, but I felt like I had a lot of, legal and different types of expertise outside of the law in terms of development that I felt like I could bring to Ethiopia. But when I came back, I met somebody through somebody who used to work at ICS, actually connected me. And he actually had his own consulting firm. He was an older gentleman that had it for a while, and met me. And on the spot, after we talked for, I don't know, about an hour or so, he asked me to, join his consulting firm and be the managing director. Because of my, background, which he really liked, he thought was, unique and would be helpful. And I said, well, that's a big role. We should discuss it more. He's like, no, I'm traveling to Rwanda this weekend, and then I'm going to Kenya, so I won't be back for a couple of weeks. So we can talk. I think at the time there was like Skype. So we'll talk on that in terms of the details. But I really want you to work for me, and so it ended up being a great opportunity. So I ended up working for him, for several years. For the 3 years with him, and then also had a friend who ran an organization called the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. So I had left the consulting firm for about 6 months to help at the Pan-African Chamber. It's a gentleman named Kibr Dästa, which I still know, respect very much. Learned a lot, about Africa and Ethiopia. And then I ended up coming back to consulting firm because it was this opportunity to collaborate with an international consulting firm to do a big tax gap analysis and a revenue potential study for Ethiopia. And I thought this was a great opportunity to learn a lot about Ethiopia, the economy, the government. So I took on this role, and it ended up being, an excellent project that I worked on, and then transitioned me to what I ended up doing next.
And what was that? What did you end up doing next?
Well, after that, I felt like, okay, this is a long, year-long project. Learned a lot about the country, and then thought, okay, this might be a good time to start, my own consulting firm. And then I become friends with somebody I didn't know before. He had a similar life in terms of like, being born in Ethiopia but living in the U.S. But he had more of a finance and investment background. So we ended up, starting a consulting firm together, and we called it Veritas. And we did a lot of economic development work, both with the private sector, foreign investors, and local companies looking for foreign investment. But then we also worked a lot with the government because of, my background working for the government, and some projects that came up with the Investment Commission, the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Mines. We did a variety of different projects. But we were able to leverage, our network knowledge and skills to do some really interesting work with the government, with the private sector. So I ended up doing that for the next 5 years.
Why Veritas? Was there a reason behind the name Veritas?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting story, because it was not the first name that we had. But back then, especially, opening up a business in Ethiopia wasn't easy. So we went to the Ministry of Trade and that Sabah Trade Bureau, to try to get this name used. And there was some old laws, like the restricted word names you could use, and the first couple of names ideas that we had, they wouldn't let us use them. They said it was against the legislation, or another company had a similar sounding name. So eventually, I came up with the idea: why don't we use a word in Latin? There'll be no other company that has that name. But also Veritas actually has excellent meaning in the terms of obviously it means truth, but it's also the motto of Harvard, University and Harvard Law School. So I thought that would be a great name for the company, and and he liked it as well. So I think it was like third, fourth on our list, but ended up being the name. And even though I left the company, the name continues, and then all business partners continuing working and expanding that firm. So,
are there any experiences you had? Here you are, you're founding a company, you're beginning to understand the entrepreneurial landscape in Ethiopia. Are there any memories you have of that period, of those experiences, walking into or having to deal with the entrepreneurial framework or infrastructure that existed?
Yeah. I mean, we actually ended up doing one project on entrepreneurship and how to support entrepreneurship in Ethiopia with the Canadian government. So we ended up doing surveys, all over the country, and really seeing, how, because most of the people in any country are entrepreneurs, small businesses, in some countries, not even small businesses, micro enterprises, and they're really the backbone of the country. So, how could they really scale that up? What kind of skills they need? How could they get financing? What are the disparities that exist? Especially on issues such as gender. So that was definitely an interesting experience, particularly when, as difficult as it was, working in Addis and working, with the city and the federal government, when you're going to the regions, particularly in regions where, they're quite small in terms of development, the economy is quite small, and so was their capacity and skills. So certain regions like that had like very, like pretty much limited to no records that were computerized, and everything was in file folders and paper, and trying to get, data collectors to go through that. And it was definitely had some, challenging experiences trying to travel to different regions and trying to get permits. And had some interesting experiences both, on that project and even just more generally, as I said, the story about registering the company, but then even we had gone to one government office who kept giving us a hard time to get our tax license. And the person eventually said, "Oh, let's meet for coffee outside the government office," and then pretty much, asked for a facilitating payment to help us get the license, which we weren't willing to do. But so you always encounter these types of issues that you that even if you expect them, still are still learning experiences in terms of like how things work.
You've been gone for about 14 years. You've returned now a few years. You're now settling in. And Are there any experiences that you can recall? Any such experiences or stories you care to share?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was trying to recall one, but yeah, that was like very specific, and I think I guess, unique for your listeners. I do remember once definitely when I was in Ethiopia. I was after work, and then I found out that my internet wasn't working, and then I asked, tried to call other friends and stuff like that, see what's going on, and yeah, no one's internet was working, and then found out that the government had just shut down internet, and it wasn't, I think, initially clear, what was happening, and this was a while ago. It was the previous government. There was no, nothing in the news, and there was like not much Twitter and stuff like back then. So later, found out. I don't know if it was a couple hours later, the next day, that the government had decided to shut down the internet because they found out that there was a big scandal in terms of tests that had been stolen for people going to university, and this is like national, tests that people take, and the government figured that the way they were going to manage that was to conduct the testing because it's all around the country, but just to have no internet for, I don't know how long it was for. Was for at least several days, maybe 4 or 5 days or something like that. And then trying to figure out how you're going to reschedule all this work and meetings that you had, particularly working with international partners. Yeah, that was definitely one interesting memory. But another one was, after I left Veritas, I started working for the president's office, and unfortunately there was an incident when there was this really famous singer, that was killed. And after that, the government also, this was a newer government, shut down the internet. But this one was a much bigger issue in the sense that there was no protest going around, all over the country. So there was a very fragile security situation going on. So the streets were shut down, and but I still had to go to the office. So that was like another kind of interesting experience when everybody's locked up at home, wondering what's going to happen. But I'm still going to the office, and I ended up having internet in the office since I was working for the president. But yeah. So there's definitely been some interesting times and tough times in the country, and I definitely have to adapt and learn from them.
So you've made the transition now from Veritas to becoming the president, an advisor to the president. How did you make that decision to enter government?
Because of the time I'd spent in the U.S. working for government and always an interest I had, that's something I've always wanted to do when I came back to Ethiopia. But I definitely didn't know, at what time that I would do that in terms of my life, and my career. But while I was at Veritas, there was this thing called the Africa list of like CEOs of the companies, their future CEOs. This was conducted by the Sovereign Wealth Fund of the UK, and it was in multiple countries. So that this retreat that was in Zimbabwe, so I had time to think about and reflect. I've been at Veritas for, as I said, at that time 4.5 years, and thinking about what I wanted to do for the next step. And I had a good relationship with one of our projects was the Ethiopian Investment Commission, and the investment commissioner ended up being when the government changed and Prime Minister Abiy came into power. He ended up appointing this former investment commissioner, Dr. Fusum, as his chief of staff. And then later on, he ended up going to the U.S. He was appointed to be U.S. ambassador. But before he was appointed, he was appointed, but before he left, he asked me for, some advice about the U.S. since, I worked in Congress, and this was, his first time working in the foreign ministry. So we exchanged some ideas, shared some of my thoughts. And then he said, you should really do something with the government because of, the work that you've done, the experience you've had. And I said, yeah, well, I'd be interested to actually. So we talked about, the investment commission with the new investment commissioner. But then I also knew that there was a new president in the country, and I'd met her once before when she's head of the UN in Kenya. And I thought that would be a really interesting opportunity because I had never worked in, the foreign service. So I thought I'd learn a lot about, diplomacy because of both her background and the position of the presidency. But also, I thought, that position had a lot of potential because in the past, even though it's the head of state, it had been a lot more ceremonial role, but it could have been a much more, impactful position. So when I learned she was looking for a senior advisor, you know, and I knew somebody who, was helping her with that search, I discussed that with them and they thought, yeah, I think that would be a great idea. She ended up, her office ended up calling me and I ended up meeting with her and it was supposed to be a 30-minute meeting, but, ended up talking for over an hour, and, shared ideas in terms of, my past and my background and how I thought I could, support her and her vision. And ended up being a great meeting. And then she wanted me to join her. So then I had to have that discussion with my business partner, and she wanted me to join, very soon, and how I had to manage that transition. And so ended up being a great opportunity that I couldn't pass up. So I ended up, selling the shares of my company to my old business partner and joining our office.
And in retrospect, what was the experience like?
Oh, it was an incredible experience. It was also very, transformational. This was very different from when I worked on the Hill because, I was the older and more experienced, but also Ethiopia is such a different country from the U.S. So yeah, it was an incredible experience because we had some initiatives that we set up on diplomacy, on women's empowerment. And the president was the first female president of Ethiopia, and she really wanted to support future leadership of women. So we set up a leadership program for government leaders. We also worked on a mentorship program for female students and how to try to improve the trajectory of women going to university because Ethiopia had done a good job of expanding access to education, but the quality of education in Ethiopia, public education, still was lacking. So we wanted to see how we can support that, and then she also ended up being appointed, by the UNESCO to be the commissioner of a commission that happens only once every 25 years on the futures of education. And it was the first time a woman, first time an African was a chair, and I got an opportunity to lead that effort. So learned a lot about international education, a lot about diplomacy, and this was a time also that the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia was being built and was nearing completion. But there was definitely a lot of challenges, with the Egyptian government, and the Trump was in the president of the United States in his first term, and his Treasury Secretary was trying to mediate that relationship, and the president ended up representing Ethiopia at the United Nations General Assembly. So I remember staying up late at night working on the speech, making changes to it, with the president, and she decided to give the speech in Amharic, and first time since Emperor Haile Selassie had addressed the UNGA in Amharic. That experience of working with her and having all the bilateral and multilateral meetings that we had with world leaders was a very formative experience.
And how long were you with the government before you got the itch again and decided to shift gears?
Yeah, I do get the itch. I get restless. So I worked for her for 3 years as a senior advisor. But then I felt like, we'd done a good job in terms of working on all those initiatives. We'd finished that report that took a year on the futures of education and presented it there, and worked on a lot of other initiatives in Ethiopia. Also, in that time, issues like COVID and conflicts happened, and we supported the government on, she became a champion for Gavi, so trying to get vaccines for Ethiopia. I learned a lot about, the Ministry of Health and what was going on and access to health in Ethiopia. And I'd also, in that intervening time, I had become friends with a friend of mine I went to law school, sister, She was a doctor working in Ethiopia, and then she had returned first South Africa, and then first the U.S. and South Africa, and she had an idea of developing a cancer clinic. And I was advising her before. This was back, my first couple of years in Ethiopia. But many years later, she still had that idea, and she wanted me to partner with her on that. So I ended up, focusing on this initiative, and then also got an opportunity to be a country manager for a company called Afrique, which is an African fintech based in South Africa, who was trying to expand its presence in Ethiopia, and they wanted me to be their country manager. So I ended up joining them then, and that's when I left the president's office, about 3 years ago, and joined Afrique as a country manager for Ethiopia initially, and then later on for the Horn of Africa as well.
You do move around, don't you, with so much going on? Talk to us a little more about the oncology center, beginning with the name. It's called Kibr Dästa?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kibr means respect in Amharic, and Desta means joy. So the reason we came up, with that name was, we want to make sure, and as I said, my business partner, Dr. Lilai, was a driving force, that we saw the care that Ethiopians were receiving in Ethiopia in both public hospitals and private hospitals and clinics. And we thought the quality of care was very low, could be improved, substantially. And we thought the way that the patients should be treated is, respect is a very important part of Ethiopian culture. So we wanted to make sure that was emphasized, but that also that, people that are sick, particularly with the ailments as devastating as cancer can be, it is not joyful, but we definitely want to impart that joy by being a support and providing holistic care for patients. And we felt like this type of holistic care didn't really exist in Ethiopia, so we really wanted to elevate the quality of care so that Ethiopians could get the same quality of care they could get in other countries if they had the means. So that's the reason we named it that, and we set up a foundation last year in the U.S. and have a very supportive board from different areas, ranging from medicine, to finance, to other areas. And we held our first fundraiser recently, just a couple of weeks ago, in Bethesda, Maryland, close to Washington, D.C., where there's a large Ethiopian population where my business partner works. And then we found a partner in Ethiopia as well, who has experience in diagnostics, was building a medical plaza, and somebody I knew and trusted, named Brooke Fugadu. So we're working with him to, we actually just incorporated the cancer center last week, and we're working on launching it, in the coming weeks.
So what's the expected outcome you're hoping for as you get involved with building out this foundation and the oncology center?
The outcome we want is to really, save a lot of lives in Ethiopia and really transform the landscape when it comes to oncology care, chemotherapy for cancer patients. And initially, we're going to focus on breast cancer because that's the most prevalent cancer in Ethiopia. And then in the future, we want to expand to other cancers as well, such as colon cancer. And then we view this as just the beginning of the type of intervention that we want to do in Ethiopia. I hope that we're successful, and I expect that we will be. And over time, we want to expand, and build, our own hospital. And we really committed to improving the quality of care in Ethiopia, saving people's lives, and making it a sustainable endeavor. And the purpose of the foundation is, obviously we want this cancer center to be sustainable and profitable. But we also know that there's a lot of people that can't afford the care. So we set up the foundation to support patients that want to get care but can't afford it.
So currently, if I remember, those who need such care today need to leave the country to get that treatment, and not everybody can afford to do that. Is that?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. People who have the means to do that, there's a lot of medical tourism that exists in Ethiopia. So people that have the means go to, a lot of people go to Thailand and India. Turkey is becoming another destination. Kenya also has, better care than Ethiopia when it comes to cancer. And people go to other countries as well, Dubai, UAE, South Africa, and the US and Europe as well. The care doesn't really exist in terms of the quality of care, access to medication. As I mentioned, the holistic care as well. We plan to have cancer navigators and provide psychosocial support. But also, if people are going to existing facilities here, whether they be public, where the wait times are, many, many months, but even the private facilities, don't really specialize in cancer care. So there's not that expertise, and the way in which it's provided as well, is at a very low quality that can really be improved in terms of how the medication is mixed and delivered.
Yohannes, what's your philosophy when it comes to community impact or social impact?
My philosophy has been from a very young age that we all have a responsibility to leave the world better than when we found it. I'm very committed to my country, Ethiopia, but to my community as well, and that community includes my family and friends, of course, but to all the people around me. So I'm personally, very committed to working to improve the lives of others, and I feel that actually benefits me as well, because I think when you help others, you're enriching your own soul and your own spirit. So I find that very fulfilling.
So how long has it been since you returned, and looking back, how would you grade the experiences so far?
Yeah, I've been back a long time. I've been back 14 years now since I moved back in 2011. And I've, traveled a lot of, different journeys in terms of, professionally, all the different jobs I've had. But then also I've had a lot of personal challenges as well. I moved back to spend time with family. But unfortunately in that time, both my mom and dad passed away. My dad more recently, for my mom, it's been a longer period. But, that was very, very difficult. But obviously it helped that I was here and I got to spend time with them. And then I had the support of my siblings and friends as well. That would have been much more difficult to deal with if I'd been in the US and I hadn't gotten the chance to spend that time with them. So I've had definitely a mix of experiences personally and professionally. But, I felt like from all of that, both hardship and privileges that I've had, I've learned a lot, and I think I've tried to be a better person out of it.
In all of this time and with all of these experiences, has your definition of home changed?
Yeah, it has, because I think home really is defined by the people around you. I think it's the people that you call your community, your friends, your family, the people you work with and live with and share that life with. I think that's really where home is. So, I've had very different experiences here in Ethiopia and in the US, but I really feel like I have a very strong foundation because of the relationships I've had, in both countries. And I think, my definition of home has definitely changed.
So what advice will you give to others who wish to walk the same path you walked, of returning home and building something meaningful? How should they go about it?
Yeah. Well, one I would say, in terms of your last question, in terms of where home is, I think relationships matter a lot. So I think when they're trying to go back to their home country, the relationships they forge, whether it's the family they already had, or friends they knew from before, or new ones, or professional relationships and networks that they built, I think those, really matter. even more so than, in the US or Europe or wherever they're coming back from, because it really is, even big countries such as Ethiopia or Nigeria, South Africa, your network, really matters. So I think the relationships are very important. And then I would also say, in terms of expectations, I would recommend that people don't bring their expectations to their country, in the sense that, like, you have to adapt to the country you're going to, even if it's where you're from and you think, well, a country is not going to adapt to you. You're the one who has to adapt to that country, just like if they immigrated to the US like me, and then end up coming back, you have to be the one that has to adapt. So your mindset and your expectations is really key.
Thanks, Yohannes. Are there any final words you have to share with us?
No, I mean, I really enjoyed speaking with you, Chudi. This was a great experience, and I'm very happy that my friend Melarita, introduced us. And then what I would say is, like, it's not like, one size fits all. There's no one path. That's what I'd recommend to people. So people should definitely trust themselves. And if you're not ready to jump back in, to going back to your country, go there, spend I would say an extended period, not just a couple of weeks, but take some time, a couple of months, to really learn about it, and then figure out what you can do. There's some people that just go straight back and start a business, and that's not me, but maybe they're able to do that. And some other people might want to work for other people or work for an international organization, learn about the country. So I would say, just trust your instincts, and you'll be able to figure it out. You just have to be determined and persistent, and you can persevere, is what I would say.
So you heard it from Yohannes. Take your time, trust yourself, come in with an open mindset, and the opportunities do exist, as it has been demonstrated by what he shared with you today. This is the Africa2100 Podcast, and I'm your host, Chudi Obiaye. Thank you for listening. And please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. Bye for now.